All right, we're going to look at this problem where it's kind of like a fraction bar. So we have x over 8. One of the things that we have to remember about something like this, x over 8, it's equivalent to 1/8 x. So dividing by 8 is the same as taking an eighth of something. So to remove that fraction from the equation and get it to 1x, we know that we can multiply by the reciprocal, 8 over 1. So when we look at this dividing by 8, we can think, well, to undo dividing by 8, I would need to multiply by 8. So I need to multiply this side of the equation by 8, which means I also need to multiply this side of the equation by 8. So when I multiply by 8 and divide by 8, if you want, you can distribute, but it's really creating more work than it's worth, because you would distribute the 8 and it would become 8x over 8 equals 24. But then you know 8 over 8 creates a whole. So 1x equals 24. So oftentimes what I suggest you do is that when you multiply by 8, you would just multiply it by 8, multiply it by 8, and automatically know that this multiplying by 8 and dividing by 8 will undo each other, and then you get x to be alone. Okay. Let's look at this one. It's a little bit more complicated because there's more in the equation, but we're taking something and dividing it by 4, and when we have something divided by 4 and it equals 7, we have to think about what's the value of this. So we can really use our number sense and think something divided by 4 is 7. And hopefully you know that 28 divided by 4 is 7. So what you're essentially doing is you are thinking about multiplying by 4. That's why you know it's got to be 28. So we are going to multiply this side of the equation by 4. Now remember, we could technically go through the distributing the 4, but we really need to recognize that multiplying by 4 and this dividing by 4, they undo each other. So those 4s create a 1. Okay, multiplying by 4 and then dividing by 4 is essentially a negative, like there's no change. So I'm left with 2x plus 6 equals 28. And that's what we know. We know that 28 divided by 4 equals 7. So this top amount has to be 28. And that's what my equation now shows. Now it's just kind of a standard solving problem where we would subtract 6 from both sides. 6 minus 6 makes 0. And then 28 minus 6 is 22. And then we would divide both sides by 2. And we would get x equals 11. And we can always check it. 2 times 11 is 22, plus 6 is 28, and 28 divided by 4 makes 7. All right, let's take a look at this problem. This problem is kind of a cross between a fraction problem and kind of our normal problem where we just have whole numbers that we're dealing with. So when we're solving this problem, we want to get rid of this minus 5 first from our equation. Because remember, our goal is to isolate the x. So our goal is to kind of get this alone and then get this alone. So we're trying to work our way closer and closer to getting x isolated. So to remove that minus 5 from the equation, I'm going to say I'm going to add 5. And when I do that, I get 4x over 3 equals 20. Okay? Now, you kind of have two options when you're trying to solve this now. Okay? You can think of it as a fraction, like 4x over 3 equals 20, and you can say, I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal because I have 4/3 here, so I'm going to multiply by 3/4. So I'll multiply this by 3/4. Okay, and when you do that, these would cancel, right? We get x, and over here, we would get 60 over 4, and 60 divided by 4 is 15. So that would be one option to solve this equation. Okay. The other option is to kind of separate your steps a little bit more. So you could remove that dividing by 3 first. So I could say I'm going to multiply both sides by 3. And when I do that, these 3's would cancel. And I get 4x equals 60. And then I would divide both sides by 4. And I would get x equals 15. So the great thing about solving is you find the way that makes sense to you, and you can stick with that. There's multiple ways to think through a solving problem. All right, why don't you take a second and solve this one on your own? And so hit pause and solve it, and then when you're done, you can hit play, and I'll work through the problem. All right, so I'm going to start by multiplying both sides by 2. These cancel. We get 4x plus 8 equals negative 24. All right, and then I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides. And I get 4x equals negative 32. And then my last step is divide by 4. And I end up with x equals negative 4. So x equals negative 4. That would be our answer.